If you're a dividend investor who wants to become a millionaire as soon as possible, then you should care about a dividend's compound annual growth rate, or dividend CAGR. What's up everybody, GenExDividendInvestor here. My friend Dave over at Hidden Freedom Investing was chatting with myself and Minds in Motion about dividend CAGR, and he suggested I should do a video going into more detail about what dividend CAGR actually is and why it's so critical for dividend growth investors to understand it. So for example, in my ExxonMobil stock reveal video I just did, I showed a copy of my portfolio spreadsheet that looks something like this, and I talked about various dividend CAGR metrics. So in this video I'm going to show you some examples of why dividend CAGR is so important by using a new modeling spreadsheet I created, and which I'll include a link to in my description below, so you can make a copy of it and put in your own values into your own version to see how various stocks in your portfolios could grow over time. My version is locked down so you can only view it, but after you make a copy of mine, then your version will be private to you and you'll be able to input stuff into it. And if you screw something up, you can always come back to my version and make a fresh copy and start over. So compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, is the rate of return for an investment to grow from its beginning balance to its ending balance, assuming the profits are reinvested at the end of the year. That being said, dividends are actually paid out quarterly, generally speaking, so I created my model to reflect that, which you could actually call a compound quarterly growth rate, but that's a nuance that doesn't really matter too much for this example video. The longer the historical performance that you're looking at, the more confidence I put in thinking that the future estimate is reasonable. And what I mean is that I put more weight into a 10-year dividend CAGR than a 3-year dividend CAGR. Obviously, there's no guarantees in future performance estimating because we can never accurately predict the future, but I found it to be a good estimate. And if anything doesn't make sense, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it. So hopefully after you watch this video, it'll be clear as to why looking for safe dividend CAGR is so much more important than starting dividend yield. Newer dividend investors tend to look for higher starting yields in their investments as opposed to what I feel they should be doing, which is looking for a high safe dividend CAGR with a long history. By safe, I mean companies that have consecutively increased their dividend, thus have a CAGR that you can put more weight behind. Alright, so let's jump into a snapshot of the 12 stocks in my portfolio spreadsheet I've revealed, and then go into the modeling spreadsheet I've created. And remember, on Friday I'll be revealing my 13th stock out of the 25 in my portfolio, so watch for that as well. Okay, let's take a look at an example here. So Leggett & Platt, and if you guys have been following my videos, then you're used to this kind of format. Leggett & Platt, it says it has a 2.9% starting yield, and we see the annual dividend is $1.60. So each share of Leggett & Platt will give you $1.60 a year, or 40 cents a quarter, $1.60 divided by 4. Now, where did this 2.9% yield come from? So if you go to Google and you say, let's look up what Legg's ticker is, you see it as a 2.9%. So where that comes from is the amount it pays out in dividends per year, which we saw is $1.60, divided by the share price. So $1.60 divided by 55.18 and times 100 to get it in percentage format. So 2.899, or 2.9%. So that's how the dividend yield is created. And that's also why, as the share price fluctuates throughout the day, the dividend yield changes. So this was the closing price on Friday. So you'll notice during the day, if you refresh what the ticker is in Google, its dividend yield will be changing because its stock price is changing. Okay, so now you understand where dividend yield, how it's calculated and why it changes. So in this, we have that for Legg, its starting yield is 2.9%, and its 10-year dividend compound annual growth rate is 4.1%. As opposed to maybe Pfizer, which has a starting yield of 3.89% and a dividend yield of 4.2%, or Disney, which has a really low starting yield, 1.28%, but a 21.5%. So then the question is, well, what's better? How does it play out? Like, if it's if it has a higher 10-year, at what point does it overtake the starting yield of these other stocks? And that's kind of what this modeling tool does. This is the spreadsheet that you'll click on in my description. You'll get a link to it. To make a copy, you just come up here and go File, Make a Copy. Copy it, call it whatever you want. Just hit OK. And then the copy will end up on your private Google Drive. No one else can touch it. It'll look just like this. The blue cells are the cells that you can edit. And so, for example, this right now is modeling if you had $10,000 and the 20-year dividend compound annual growth rate. I called it 20, but it doesn't really matter. So, and then the share price, I put it just at a default 100. And then I assume quarterly the share price increases 1%. You can always zero this out and things will actually increase, will grow a lot faster. But for now, I just felt that was a reasonable starting growth rate. And then there's a starting dividend yield. And then here's a field that if you want to use it, if you want to estimate what would happen if you added cash to the portfolio. And then right down here is it kind of shows you what all would happen if you had a $10,000 stock with an 8.4% compound annual growth rate and a starting dividend yield of 4.92%, how it would grow over time. So initially that would buy you 100 shares because they're $100 each. And you'd get $492 of passive income in year 1. And then over time, you can see how that grows. So by year 10, instead of having 100 shares, if you're doing the drip, which is what this model, so you'd have 167.01 shares, your account value would have grown to $23,895, and now you'd be dripping $1,698. And you can see the magic of compounding. Imagine if this was in a Roth IRA, so you're not paying taxes on it, and so you're 20 years old, you put 10,000 into something, how that would grow. And this is the ridiculousness of compounding and how powerful it is, and why Einstein said it was, one of the 8th wonders of the world, because it just becomes ridiculous. I mean, you can see here in that, year 60, if it was every year they increase their dividend, you can see what your account value could grow to being. So in this case, starting with 100 shares of a stock that had an 8.4% compound annual growth rate and a 4.92% starting yield could grow to $9 billion 60 years from now, dripping, what is that, $5 billion a year. I mean, it just gets obscene, right? Or you could say, well, let's say if I had a $20,000 portfolio, but let's use Chevron, which is a 6.4% compound annual growth rate over 10 years. So we'll do 6.4%. And then their starting yield for Chevron is 3.94. So you see how it changes. At year 20, your account value would be at 100 grand. At year 40, it would be at $1 million. You can see how much it'd be dripping. It'd be dripping $94,000 a year. And then you can also say, okay, well, let's just say my time frame that I care about things is, 25 years or 10 years. Then you can model how the portfolio would be growing and with the passive income. And then you can come down here and see kind of the more nuanced details. So again, the turquoise colored input fields are things that you should change. You can edit any column you want, but those are the ones you should change. So here's stock price. Since we have it increasing by 1% per quarter, you see it starts at $100, and then 1 quarter later it goes up to 101, then it goes up, again. So this is showing, this is how share price gets changed over time. And if you go for the, I basically have it going out to 60 years in the spreadsheet, you can see that what started at $100, if it changes by 1% every quarter, each share would be $1,078 60 years from now. And then it shows you how the portfolio changes. And so again, what's really useful is to kind of go into these details here and go, okay, as time goes on, in year 2042, what would it look like? What would my portfolio value be? What would the share price be? How many shares would I have? How does the quarterly dividend grow? Or annual dividend, really. But this shows you, for example, that it stays the same until they go to their increase. So to go into how compound annual growth rate affects it, in this case, if a dividend is starting at 99 cents, it stays 99 cents for 4 quarters or a year, and then they increase it by, in this case, 6.4%, and the dividend goes to $1.05, and then they stays at $1.05 for 4 quarters until they increase the dividend by 6.4%, and then we see it goes to $1.12. And so that's how a compounded dividend, that's how the dividend grows over time. And if this is a quarterly dividend, then the annual dividend is just the quarterly times 4. Shows how your dividend yield would change, how much is being paid quarterly into a drip, and how much that would be passively annually. And this is how many shares your drip would purchase. So, in the first quarter you had purchased 2.23 shares because it dripped $246 worth, and each share is 110, so it buys 2.23 shares, which is why in the next quarter you went from 220.71 shares to 222.93 shares, and then it just goes on and on and on and on. So by playing with these values up here, basically whatever your portfolio size is, this showed us 20,000. If you want to do, at the time Dave was saying, well, what would $1 million look like? So if you put in $1 million, it shows you it would get to $1 billion in your portfolio value would be $1 billion in 60 years if it was a 6.4% compound annual growth rate on the dividend and at a starting yield of 3.94. And you can see it'd be dripping $157 million a year, believe it or not. So hopefully this, I included some examples of ExxonMobil's 10-year dividend compound annual growth rate. Over here is 8.4%, Disney's is 21.5%, Pfizer's is 4.2%, as well as the starting yield. So I listed, example of a few stocks as a frame of reference. You can find what the compound annual growth rates are on websites. So on Guru Focus, you can put this information in. It'll tell you what the 10-year dividend compound annual growth rate is. And again, dividend yield, you can either calculate yourself or just look up on the ticker. Type in PFE ticker, and it'll show you what the starting dividend yield is. So that's where you can get the, this value. And then also over here on the right-hand side, I included the formula to basically reverse engineer the compound annual growth rate. And so this is taking the ending value, dividing it by the starting value. You can look at the cells if you want to see specifically which ones, but in this case it's taking the ending dividend divided by the starting dividend and go to the power of 1 over the number of years minus 1. And I just did that to reverse engineer that this amount that's being calculated was correct down here, and that's what this is for. So you don't really have to worry about this. This is just more for me to reverse engineer to make sure that the spreadsheet seemed accurate. And I kind of threw this together and it seemed accurate based on this test. But I haven't QA'd this to make sure it's accurate. So I wouldn't use this to make any investment decisions, but it's a good way to just get a kind of an understanding of what CAGR is. Okay, I think that covers it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll see you on Friday for my next review. Remember, I'm not a financial advisor, and these videos are for entertainment, inspiration, and educational purposes only. Investing of any kind involves a risk. I'm only sharing my opinion with no guarantee of gains or losses on investments. Don't use this information without double checking it and talking to someone a lot smarter than me after you completely understand it. So I'll see you in the next video, and remember to stay positive, patient, play for the long term, keep investing in great companies, budget reasonably, and win. I know you can do it. Just like I know you can hit the subscribe, like, and bell icons, share this video with others, and comment below.